What's up, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I am your host, Chris. We are now in the month of March, and I don't know where this year is already going, but we are already 3 months deep into what has already been a pretty crazy year. I feel like I feel like every single month this year has felt like a year. So thank you guys again for your ongoing support and linking me to some of your friends to hop on this podcast today. Today's special guest I have, he is also a mental health advocate who kind of has his own little movement going as well. I found him on Instagram and just started going through his page and seeing all the stuff he posts, and just quite frankly, he's pretty inspirational to me. I like the content he posts, and the movement he named is called Hey Man Movement. So please help me introduce Jason. Jason, how you doing, man?
Hey Chris, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I couldn't be more grateful to join you.
Oh man, I'm super stoked to have you on, because I know we kind of pushed this back a couple times. Our schedules just didn't line up, or we both got sick, which is pretty funny. Um, but yeah, man, I'm super excited to have you on, and I think it's really funny that we're both wearing Project Valhalla shirts too. So it's already a great start.
Oh, it's awesome. Like their message and what they mean to men and women who serve and their families, and the messages that they, resonate with us already. We both popped on. We had this both have a different variation of a shirt on. It was like, what? Like how cool is that, right? So yeah, absolutely.
So let's jump right into it, man. I like I said in the intro, I very fascinated by the content you post because the videos you post are so powerful. And the top of the list, the very first question I had was the Hey Man movement name. I think it is like one of the most brilliant names I have ever heard. And because it's so simple
Yeah.
and so powerful, tell me how this came to be. Like what does the Hey Man movement mean to you?
Yeah. First off, thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me. Uh, the Hey Man movement was, as I had my mental health movement myself, there's a lot of play on with it, a lot of play on words with it, because every day I feel like, I send a text, hey man, how are you? Hey man, this, or hey man, that. And so I started thinking to myself, like, and even thinking to my own inside mental health of like, hey man, how are you doing? Checking in with myself. And so I started thinking, I pictured this broader world of where like guys were always just like, hey man, how are you? Hey man, how are you? And we kind of naturally do it anyway. And just creating that brotherhood with us, right? And like, hey man, truly, how are you? Hey man, can I help you? And it I'm glad to hear it kind of resonates, because it struck a chord within me. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna run with what I know and what I love and feel. And hey man, how are you? So
Yeah. And it's the meaning behind even just asking that, regardless of who it is. It could be some random older gentleman who happened to serve, or just some guy who's having a bad day. And I
hmm
said this in my last podcast with one of my best friends, and it's you don't realize the type of power that we have as human beings when we say simple things like "How are you?" or even a nod, like us guys
hmm
do when we're walking past each other, just a nod and a smile. It's
Yeah.
little things like that.
hmm
People underestimate the power behind such simple things. Like in a complex world where there's nothing but technology and nonsense now, it's guys like you and me and so many others in this community that are trying to make a difference. It's so nice to hear that there are guys out there willing to put themselves out there like that, especially, you know, um, in our generation, because I'm sure the
hmm
generation before us and before them, it wasn't as simple as just telling people how you feel, because that's not manly enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that statement right there. And I think that's where, like you said it, like, random guys, or yeah, hit the nod and like, hey, what's up, man? It's just like it almost feels like a natural thing. And
Yeah,
to try and be there for each other, whether it's your best friend or your dad or your brother, whoever. It's like, hey, man, how are you?
right, right. And it's so funny that people joke around that men are such simple creatures, and we really are, man. Like we can
We
just
are.
like
Yeah,
we can just like say hi to the neighbor and talk like we've been friends for like 10, 15 years and we've only known each
so
other for
true.
like 5 minutes.
It's so true.
And it's so easy to connect with people, like hobbies and stuff. But when it gets to the vulnerable stuff, man, is when I feel it gets interesting because
Yeah.
as a man personally, I feel it's a little easier to open up to guys than it is to women, just because that stigma has always been put on our back of, men don't share feelings. Men
Mm-hmm.
don't talk about what they're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the videos that you posted that we'll dig into here in a few. Um, I always found it interesting when you started, talking about your family life and you started talking about the things that you struggle with in terms of like your kids being young and wishing they were older and stuff. Like it's always interesting to me to see where everybody's breaking point is, where they actually start talking about it
Mm.
because in a world of fast information and the unfortunate rise of male suicide, man, I feel that spaces like this are super important to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Yeah, and you talk about the rise in male suicides. There is the statistics are up there to like about 700,000 men we lose worldwide every year. And here's the kicker of that part. Those are the men who actually have committed it worked for lack of a better word, that didn't fail in the process. And that you take you I would love to see the statistic of, and I've searched for it and I couldn't nail down some type of number, but the attempts, right? And those are that so much higher. And so I couldn't agree more.
And it's interesting how social media treats that conversation of male
Mm,
suicide because I feel like it's always undermined. It's always just kind of like, well,
hmm.
this demographic attempts more than this demographic, and it's like it's totally not the point, man.
No, no, it's
It's the
not.
fact it's the fact that we're in a silent epidemic of male suicide. It's probably the best way that we can describe what's going on right now because there
Yeah.
are so many guys out there. We're even bleeding into the younger generation of guys that
Hmm.
are taking their life.
Hmm.
And it's almost like it takes a celebrity or somebody of a high status to do that for the world to talk about it. And then the next day or week, it stops.
Hmm.
And at this point, it's hard to people like you and I are fighting that uphill battle just trying to get the message out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I don't want it to ever be, that fad, right? Like you said, like a celebrity gets a quote or something about men's mental health, and all of a sudden it's the thing for a week or two, and then it kind of fades out. But then there's this undertone of still just the average guy out there trying to make it work day in and day out. And I
Right.
think that's where you and I and other people who have gone through these things and have these experiences. I think I love the saying, you know, experience is such a teacher of empathy. Like it's if you've gone through these things, you are so able to have empathy and truly feel for what they're going through. And that's the part where I'm like, a part of me is like, hey, if men's mental health continues to be on the rise, that's great. Just kind of, be aware of what, if it's a celebrity fad or if it's something else. I guess it's okay if it's making the awareness grow per se,
Right.
right? But at the
Right.
end of the day, it's like, yeah, so many of us are truly struggling day in and day out. And that's what, you and I and other guys are hoping to accomplish. Just, hey, man, how are you?
Yeah.
I'm here for you.
Absolutely. And one recent example that I can use is a gentleman was on a podcast sharing his story about his attempt. He had jumped off a bridge and, thankfully survived, with
Hmm.
the unfortunate of injuries and all the trauma that came with that attempt. And I commented on there, it made me super emotional. I'm like, dude, thank you so much for sharing your story. Like, men's mental health matters. I didn't have any venom behind that. I didn't have a we matter more undertone about it, but I got attacked for saying that from
Wow.
over 100, maybe 200 people within an hour. And it's just like I'm sitting here defending myself. And it's like, bro, this is why stuff like this is happening
Yeah.
because you guys want to make it a competition. And
That blows my mind.
even if you say men's mental health matters too, it's met with that same outrage. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
well, women's mental health matters. And I didn't say it didn't, bro. I literally didn't say it didn't. And it's it's amazing to me the power social media has in both a positive and negative light. And for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
I feel the negative is highlighted more than the positives are.
Yeah. And I think that goes true for anything, right? Like in the news, what makes a great news story? What catches people's attention? Gets shared a bunch? It's a lot of a house burned down. It's someone got hit by a car. It's a lot of a negative emotion being brought to the surface or things like that. You're totally right. And it's not just in like this men's mental health space for sure, but even more so when you get down into our men's mental health subcategory. It's
Right.
yeah, it's absolutely there. And that can we just continue to plug through it each and every day
Right.
and work to one day have that status quo not be there.
Yeah. And my biggest goal with this podcast is just, talking about my journey and everything on that is, just to leave my footprint somewhere, man, to
Yeah.
let people hear people's story like yours or mine or whoever's, and just like listen, like there are normal people out there struggling too. It's not just people that have millions and millions of dollars. It's all the little people that are struggling too. And sometimes, when I started my healing journey and I started learning all these phrases, like narcissist and love bombing and so on and so forth, um, I started seeing those words a lot more. And then the value of those words started dropping because, like you were saying, what makes a good story? Those buzzwords
Mm-hmm.
is something that we love to talk about in this community. And it's just like, okay, did you really suffer abuse? Or are you just calling it abuse? Is that
Mm-hmm.
person really a narcissist? Or are they really not a narcissist? And, again, it goes back to that, is social media a positive thing? Because sometimes I fight that battle every single day. It's like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? And it's sometimes really defeating because it feels like, everything you're working so hard to build is just, I don't want to say meaningless because obviously that's not true, but
Yeah.
it's hard to fight uphill when you're constantly being held down by an algorithm.
Yeah, absolutely. It was eye-opening to me when I finally started to open up and finally started to post about things and my experiences and trying to help others. It just a couple of things, how heavy it was for me to feel all of it and to get all the private messages and get all the things that was just like, hey, I'm struggling, I need some help, hey, all these things. Now I had to take a step back from it, and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
I didn't I understood that us men were struggling, but to the depths of where and how and why we're struggling is helped me in a way to secure my own mental health even more so. So it's still just this process of staying strong and staying strong. But man, I totally agree with you. It's heavy, and
Yeah.
it's but at the same time, you know, we can keep it positive and we can keep it going and we can keep this like, hey, there is help, even if it's one guy at a time, and
Yeah.
it's all worth it.
Right. So that kind of leads me into the second question that I had written down. It's, the conversation of being a tough man and being
Hmm.
able to work it out. And the post you put out, I feel is just so important to bring out here was I believe the show is Modern Family. Speak to that post from your recollection. What does having the accessibility of therapy mean to you as a man?
Yeah, it's yeah, so this Modern Family clip that I put up on yeah, my Instagram page, it was powerful to me because, you know, he starts ranting and about what it means to be a man, right? Um, and if you've ever seen the show, it's the grandpa, and he starts ranting and raving about if my old man could see me now, and they would just, ream me out for even trying to talk about our feelings. We're guys, we don't do that stuff. And he goes off, and it all of a sudden he's saying this out loud and verbalizing it to his family, and then all of a sudden he gets to his deeper issue. And at the very end, it's like, wow, men actually do need therapy. And he has this, he even says, he's like, wow, that felt good, after having such a hard head about being a man and not talking about your feelings. And I feel like that's where we are as a society, that this patriarchy has built us into something that we cannot be both. We cannot be a strong provider, patriarch of the family, uh, but on the other hand, we can't have our emotions, we can't have our feelings, we can't voice them, we can't have these conversations about it, or else, yep, we're seen as less than a man, we're seen as weak, and there's no way that both of those can coincide.
Right.
And I took a step back and I was like, wait a minute, why can't we have both? We're just as human as, the women in our lives, and women need that. Why don't men need that? Well, oh, they do. Well, for generation after generation, it's kind of been that way. And it was interesting. I was on another podcast, The Emotional Man, and I had a conversation with the host where men have emotions. We have emotions all the time. We're happy. We feel joy. We feel frustrated. We have all these emotions, but they're positive and negative, right? And so it's just something that we have been taught to bury, though.
Right.
And so that stuck out to me in that episode, and that little monologue of that show is like, we can and we need to be both.
Agreed. Yeah, and when I first read the post and just like word for word after watching the clip and everything, it's just like, I've had this conversation with both my therapist and also former guest as well about,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
being a man. Yeah, we're providers, we're protectors. But with that, you have to be a protector of yourself too, not just
Mm.
your surroundings. And
Mm-hmm.
as cheesy as it may sound to the people that aren't on that healing journey yet, protecting that inner child, protecting that bruised, beat up kid when you were younger, for a guy like me, a bigger guy who was bullied a lot and just tortured by my own parents, and that was just my reality. But I know as a man, I know that my feelings are just as worthy as anybody else's. And in that
Mm-hmm.
same token, I can protect the people around me, and I can protect the person that I see in the mirror every single day at whatever that means. And that comes with boundaries, that comes with having conversations like this. And I feel, clips like that where, you meet those bullheaded people that don't believe in therapy, that don't believe in sharing their feelings because
Mm-hmm.
like you said, generation after generation, being a man always meant how much can you lift and how much can you put all your feelings on your back and never talk about it. And I can't even tell you when I was able to start talking about my feelings. Probably when I was about 27, when I actually, after my second attempt, was when I was able to start talking about it again. And it's super hard talking about that sometimes. And I was on a podcast where the host had asked me like details on said attempt, not like gory details, but just kind of like where my head was at.
Mm-hmm.
And it put me in a different perspective than it usually would. And just being able to share a person's mentality who was feeling suicidal at the time, and who was a mid 20-year-old that didn't know how to channel their emotions without, feeling hopeless and angry. So when I saw that clip and when we started talking, I'm like, man, I think this is going to be one of the heaviest talk points because, like we were alluding to earlier, the male suicide rate and struggling to talk about things like this. So I do appreciate that perspective that you put out there because therapy, for some reason, is still kind of looked at like, oh, well, if you're going to therapy, you're crazy. If you're
Hmm.
going to therapy, there's that weird stigma of
Hmm.
who you are as a person, man or woman.
Yeah.
And I wish that stigma would go away.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point about therapy. I feel like it eventually will. I feel like we're getting there as a society. But yeah, we still have a ways to go. And I had never thought about going to therapy until I had the full blown mental breakdown and my world crumbled, all those things, right? And then when I started going, it was just as you mentioned, like you have that different perspective. You have this all of a sudden, man, I put so much emphasis and pressure and time and attention into these things that at the end of the day didn't really matter. And all of a sudden, when they were gone or they changed or crumbled, like there was nothing left because I had invested so much time and attention into those instead of, like you made such a great point, into yourself. And that's what us as guys do, us as men, we hold so much internally. We are terrible at sharing our emotions because as a boy, right? Hey, skinned your knee. Ah, you're all right, man. Hop up. Oh, you're
Right.
good. You're good. Dust it off. Oh, you're fine. Move, keep pushing forward. You're all right. Play through it. Whatever the phrase is, right? And so, and it's funny because I tell my son that there's nothing wrong with that. Uh, but at the same time, you know, I'm so much more aware as to talking to my son and making sure he's okay. And making sure he's there's that balance, right? And so I feel like we'll get there with the therapy and the connotations of negativity around it. But I totally feel you with that us as men is, oh, you're going to therapy? Oh, well, hey, what's up? What are you
You can
okay?
talk to me,
Like
right?
yeah,
Save your
yeah.
money. You can talk to me, bro. No, it doesn't work that way. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, I feel that for sure.
I'm really happy that you brought up, being that dad and having that balance because that actually leads me to the next question I had written down because I felt like it was something I genuinely appreciated that that you shared yourself because I feel the father is like one of the most important parts of any family. Just to have that guidance for those kids and have that discipline figure and obviously that balance like you spoke of.
Hmm.
And so let's talk a little bit about your family life. And I loved how you pointed out how hard it is to flip that switch from your work day to your home life. How do you go about not bringing work home, as I'm sure many are guilty of this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question because I still sometimes don't do a very good job of it. But it's something I'm a little more conscious of because I think this is one of the biggest struggles with us men as well is we're tied to a provider role. We're tied to our job, the income we bring in. How can we provide for them, right? And so you put so much stock in that, and you put so much time and effort and energy and all those things. And on those bad days or whatever happened at work or those frustrations, and you come home with that and you bring that into the house, it's for me personally, I feel like it's not fair to those around you. Um, it's not something that helps in any way, shape, or form. And so sometimes I'll literally pull into the garage, I'll sit in the car, I'll put on like a good like a good song that I know is just I can vibe to, 2 or 3 minutes. And I truly just put my head back and close my eyes. It's like, hey man, you got to let go of the day that you've had because inside those kids and your wife are waiting for you. They haven't seen you all day, right? they've been at school, they've been playing with friends or what, whatever the time is that you're coming home, and they're amped up, they're excited to see you, your dad, right? And so it's such a different job that you have to try and switch out of. And so that when I kind of had that revelation with me, that was like, man, I think I'm bringing home too much negativity. I'm bringing home too much of stuff that just at the end of the day, if I lost my job tomorrow, there'd be a posting in 2 weeks kind of situation. If I passed away tomorrow, someone would backfill that in a couple weeks. And what would that mean to them? Not much, right? Jason did a great job, but we got to fill that position. We'll spin it, right? What if they lost dad? What if she lost her husband? What hole would that leave? And so I had to get into that mind space of that's what matters, right? And that was kind of that feeling and meaning behind I don't want to bring home one thing into another. And trust me, I'm sitting here saying like it's easy, man. It's not easy. And some days you know, it's brought home and in, and it's like, hey, I kind of tell my wife about the day, and she's like, all right, how can I help you? What do you need? Do you need some space and whatnot? And she's, oh God, all the credit to her with that one, right? Like incredible. So that's kind of where that came from.
And I feel that that support system is so important to have, man, because I feel like
Hmm. Hmm.
in, again, today's society, as we love to lean back on, is like I feel most couples just struggle with communication and struggle with empathy. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for her to be able to hold that space for you on those bad days, I'm sure helps you immensely, especially when you try to turn off that switch and try to, be dad, play not play husband, but be the husband and,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
be the provider and supporter and everything that you are. And side question, what's your go-to song?
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot like that. I am I love all genres of music, but some of the go-tos are like Johnny Cash song. I'm a
Okay.
huge Johnny Cash fan. Bon Iver, Skinny Love for some whatever reason. Or you know what? Honestly, dude, sometimes it'll be some type of like heavy metal thing that I'm just like, I gotta release this real quick.
I love
So
it.
so I think it kind of depends on the day, really.
Cool, cool. Good to know. But
Yeah.
it's great to have that support system because I feel when people say that, oh, relationships are 50-50, and it's just like, okay, well, you say that, but are you really giving that 50-50? Are you leaning on that person and giving that support that they need on their bad days? And what is your perspective on the 50-50 aspect? Because I feel I've heard 50-50, 100-100, and what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I love that question. Something that my wife and I we came across a post, God, I don't even know, last summer sometime, and it was uh, her name is forgetting me right now, but I would love to give her credit. We came across her saying, my husband and I implemented years and years ago that we would be very aware of how much we have in a day. Like if my wife had just an awful day at home with the kids and everything just kind of fell apart and all these things, and I get home from work and she's like, hey, like I have like 20% to give out of 100, right? Like I'm pretty cooked. I'll step in. It's like, okay, thank you. Like, thank you. I got this. Go have some time, or I'll pick up a lot of this, the things that need to get done tonight for dinner, bedtimes, all the things that just like, oh man, towards the end of the day, it's a lot. Or vice versa. If I come home and just like, I have had an awful day, this and this and these meetings or whatever, right? Hey, babe, I got like 30%, and she'll step in. So, like you said earlier, I love how we we need to continue to communicate. Like you think of how much of a breakdown in our relationships are just lack of communication or miscommunication or uh you know misunderstandings that can just, and that's something I'm learning. I'm I'm learning so much more of like, I got to verbalize this. Cause normally I'm thinking in my head, I'm giving her credit for all these things and I love her so much, or I have these thoughts or I answer her question in my mind, but I didn't verbalize it. And so she like
Right.
asks again, like a little more agitated. And I'm just like, oh, I didn't like internally, I have answered that question, you
Right.
know? And so, uh, it's, it's so much more of, if you can do the 50-50 split, great. Whatever works for you and your relationship with your wife or girlfriend, however that pans out, but just communicate it, right?
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
just let them know. And it takes some work, it takes some practice, and we don't do it perfectly, I'll tell you that much. But that's kind of a thing that we've tried to do.
It's funny that you had said that you don't verbalize her, like, answering her questions out loud. When I was recording my last podcast, my friend said that about his wife too. He's like, sometimes I'll answer the question in my mind but
Yeah.
not express it. He's like, I'm getting better, but it's really hard because you're not used to like somebody actually listening.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
whether it's work and you have so much input or don't have that much input at the place you work at. It's just kind of like, yeah, you're answering questions, but you're not saying it out loud. So
Yeah.
I found that interesting that both podcasts kind of lean into each other on that one.
Yeah.
Um, so you and I kind of, we share the same goal when it comes to like mental health, especially men in a society that struggles to hear us when we need it. What do you think we could do better to ensure men are getting the help that they deserve?
It's a great question. um I think we can continue just to shed light that it's okay to ask for help. Man, it's okay when you're struggling. We've all been there. We're all going to again at some point. Uh, I think those are the biggest things that we can continue to do. What we can do better. What we can, just don't give up. I feel like the hardest thing that we touched on earlier, man, it's heavy. But just I always say, hey, keep going. The worst thing you could ever do is tell yourself that there's just nothing left, right? But we get there, and that's the frustrating part, that's the hard part, just as you know and have experienced. And so uh we just need to continue to be there for each other and continue to let men know that everybody out there is pretty much struggling. It's
Yeah,
like the to Valhalla shirt that I have a couple of, on the front, it's got that be kind, but on the back, the message is my favorite part is everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, and that's the biggest thing. Let's continue to just be there because you just never know.
absolutely. And maybe this is me like misinterpreting it sometimes in this community, but I feel like sometimes if I've ever reached out to content creators that, are big in the mental health community or, share their story once or something, and, we all have the same common goal. We're all trying to share our story. We're all trying to, get the message out any way we can. I've always found it really strange that, some people will just kind of act like, oh, well, you're a smaller account, so I don't want to, put myself on that kind of platform. And
Yeah.
I've ran into that where when I created my own mental health group on Facebook, I
Hmm.
was part of this Suicide Prevention Rocks mental health group, and I was sharing my story on there a little bit, and they had me come on a blog to tell my story. They posted the first one, and then after that, when I started to like regularly sharing my story, and they didn't post the last one that I did for them. It took me like 5 hours to write, and a month went by, and I'm like, okay, so this is kind of weird. Either it's just sitting there and they're not, maybe it was just for them to kind of filter me out instead of, my post getting attention and theirs not, or whatever. When I created that group, they kicked me out of that group because they found out I made a mental health group. And I remember the conversation I had with the admin. And, oh, did you create your own mental health group? I'm like, yeah, yeah. Is that an issue? And then I remember saying to them, aren't we doing the same thing?
Hmm.
Aren't we trying to get this message out of everybody's mental health should matter and this is your safe space, what does it matter if somebody else has a group, you know? And but sorry to sidetrack on that, but it's interesting to me when some people are just, I don't want to say they have an ego, but when these accounts that are bigger than I am, or have more traction than I do, it's like, I just want to know your story. I just want you to speak out as a man and tell me what you're going through. And it's just, it always was so strange to me that people, for some reason, just don't want to contribute the way that you and I do.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you bring that up because I've come across that too. And I said a little bit earlier, consider your source, right? What's the end goal? Like, can you really have a sense of what are they doing it for, right? Like, why are they doing this? And I ran up against that actually last summer too. Before I started speaking out, I buried it for months within my mind, within my soul, within my every fiber. I was just like, nah, this isn't for me. Like this isn't for me. If I start talking about my experiences and all these things that blah blah blah, down that rabbit hole, right? And so I reached out to uh, someone who is I was like, hey, he could be a mentor, right? I reached out to him because he was doing it and became like a keynote speaker for companies and things like that. And cool enough, we set up a little phone conversation, Zoom, FaceTime, and I started telling him like, hey, I'd love to get your help with this or get your thoughts with this or here's my ideas. And he literally was like, hey, I don't think I'm the guy to help you. I'm a little bit more competitive on that end. And I started thinking like really? Like, oh, okay. Like,
Competitive.
yeah,
Interesting.
like that was like a the first real like, oh, I thought kind of like what you said. I thought we were all in this together for the right reasons and for the true like, hey man, I'm here for you. If you need anything, hey, all of us guys are going through something. Like let's create this brotherhood and just be there for other men. Like, no, like, hey, this is my space.
Right.
What do you think you're doing? I was like, oh, okay. Well,
So
thanks for your
strange.
thanks for your thoughts. See you later. So it's yeah, it's a little interesting sometimes.
Yeah, it's it's super hard to put yourself out there like this as it is. But when you're trying to, reach
Hmm.
your hand out to other people and like, hey, I'm trying to do the same thing you are, and I'm talking to a brick wall because, I'm getting buried in this algorithm, or, people aren't really seeing me, and can you help me get my story out there? And it's just kind of like,
Hmm.
oh no, you got two followers kind of thing. It's like, all right, that's kind of weird, but sure. you know, um, but yeah, I just like I was saying earlier, it's really hard fighting that uphill battle, especially when you got these people that do it for the wrong reasons. Like
Yeah.
I feel that spotlight is on a lot of those people that do it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. 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 And again, we'll keep pushing through and we'll keep our end of the deal.
Yeah. So let's kind of jump back into, the family conversation. So as a father, you had expressed on a video that sometimes you wish your kids were perhaps older or this or that, as you named it. I think you referred it to the grass is always greener on the other side trap. Why do you feel people get caught in that trap and how it makes them feel?
Yeah. I liken it to, the meaning behind that and the feeling of it is projecting into the future. If you're never happy in the place that you're standing, why do you think 10 feet away would be any better? That grass will always be as green as how you water it, right? And so I started thinking about that with my own personal life and my mental health. And it was like, why you know, yeah, trips will be easier when the kids are older, or these things won't be as stressful. But what's crazy over the last few months is I have friends and family who have older kids, and they're like, hey, listen, Jason, you big dummy, like, no way. Like, it gets harder. It gets, all these different things. And so, with those conversations, I started to think, you know what? I need to be better at watering the grass where I stand right here. I need to quit projecting into the future because I'm going to miss out on all these things that are right in front of me. Especially with kids, like, man, they grow so fast. They change overnight, right? They all of a sudden they're saying things and doing things, and you're like, where did that come from? Wait, who taught you that?
Right.
And so just trying to be more conscious of that in my life. And I'll tell you, man, it's brought so much more peace. It's
Yeah.
brought, and that's the word I can, come as close to as I can to describing what I feel. Having to control that anxiety and depression and things like that. But yeah, now it's just peace because I've tried and spent effort and time in the present, right?
Right. I feel, just as a society, we all struggle with that living in the now,
Mm-hmm.
mentality, and just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like, I want things to be better 6 months from now. I'm like, okay, that's nothing wrong with manifesting, but what's wrong with trying to make things right now?
Mm-hmm.
What's
Mm-hmm.
wrong with, going to sleep early and tomorrow being a better day than it was today? And,
Yeah.
again, I just kind of feel like it's what you mentioned, life going so fast and fast information and technology growing like it is. And it's just, we're all in that fast food mentality. We want things right now. We want things to happen now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not wanting to essentially put in that work. And, um, you know, like you said, watering the grass that you're standing on now, and not just be like, oh, I wonder how good that patch is over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I every friend of mine that has kids, like you said, they grow so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like my
Mm-hmm.
friend, I think, posted that her son was turning 5 or something in a couple days, and I remember when she had him, like, dude, there's no way 5 years already passed by.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine how parents actually feel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty wild. It's something that it's indescribable at some point, and it's you continue to grow as a man, and you continue to learn and be humbled and be taught
Yeah,
at the same time. So,
and those are powerful lessons in its own, man. Especially
uh-huh.
the
Hmm.
being humble part, because I feel you get too comfortable for too long, and then life switches up. It's like, oh, I wasn't prepared for that. So I can only imagine the patience and being humble, being like, I guess, jolted into you the second you start having kids. And if I remember right, you said you have 5 or 4 kids.
Yeah, we have five. Yeah, they're all of it from the age of 10 and under, and we had caboose twins, and they're a little over 2 years old now, so it's all in
Wow,
between. Yeah, we have all facets going on right now. So
that's awesome.
yeah, it's amazing.
And so you said 10 and under, right?
Yeah, we have a 10-year-old daughter. My son will be 8 in a couple weeks, and then a 5-year-old daughter, and then we have a boy girl set of twins who are just over 2. So
Nice,
yeah.
nice. Um, So, what do you feel was the main goal in creating your platform? Did an incident in your life inspire you to create? And do you have a long-term goal, or is it just kind of in the starting stages of sharing your story and just, solidifying that foundation?
Yeah, so what inspired me was I sat and I thought about what I had went through, and I'm someone who what they call a people person, right? Like I have almost like a knack for I just like connecting with people. And so all of a sudden I had these just inner desires to, it was brought up so commonly and so nonchalant in conversations with my friends and with other guys that, like, yeah, I don't know, I've been kind of struggling, or yeah, my job's just it's stressing me out, or just things like that. And I was like, you know what, tell me about it, let's talk, man. Just open up to me. I wouldn't say that. It was just throughout, it turned into like a 30-minute conversation or something, right? And so I sat here, I'm like, listen, I think I want to try, I want to try this. I want to try and help people. And so I don't know. I'm at the beginning of my phase, right? Or whatever you want to call it. I want to continue to do it as long as it's needed, as long as I am able to, as long as people think whatever I have to say is useful in some subset, and just continue to help bring to light this issue that is ever prevalent, as we've seen.
Yeah, and keep sharing your story. Keep keep plugging along because every video of yours that I've watched, every little piece of insight that you have, I feel when it meets the right eyes, I know you're gonna blow up with some of that stuff because like I said at the beginning, man, you have a lot of insightful thoughts and whatever you have gone through up until now, I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation because like we were saying before, it's hard just for us guys to have this kind of space,
Hmm.
and it's even harder to open up about the things that we've gone through.
Hmm.
And all it takes is that first step, man, and you've done just that. And I applaud you for being that husband, being that father, and being that beacon of light that you need to be in your life in order to share your story. So I just want to say genuinely thank you.
Yeah, man. No, and I appreciate that. That it means a lot to me. It really does. And vice versa, like right back at you. If you hadn't reached out and we hadn't connected, right? Like none of these conversations happen. And so
Right.
it takes two to tango, man. So all the credit to you as well for, you have a podcast, you have a platform, and continue to utilize it to the best of your abilities because your story, that's what's so interesting to me and I love so much is that your story is different from mine, but man, we can connect on so many different levels and bond over that, right? And just be like, yeah, man, I felt that way too, or yeah, totally, I've been there before. And so it doesn't take the same exact story, and that's what makes it so human, right? That's what
Right.
makes it so deep and personal for everybody. But yet at the same level, we can all kind of connect to somehow. So
Right.
hey, right back at you, Chris.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. So at the end of like every podcast, I'd like to ask all my guests this because I feel it's important to get different insights and different thoughts and opinions on it. So if you could change one thing in this mental health community, what would it be?
Yeah, yeah, good question. I think it
Everybody gets stumped, bro.
no, it's okay. But you know what? We kind of talked about it already. I feel like um it's becoming quote unquote mainstream. It's becoming the thing, right? It's becoming everyone's going to put mental health awareness in their bio. Everyone's going to put mental health in their write up or, men's mental awareness or whatever the case is. And but you kind of do some digging and it's like, really? Like
Little iffy, right?
yeah, and I say that very, very genuine, very
Yeah,
loving in a subset of I don't want it to be brushed aside and then what's the next fad in 2025,
right,
right?
right.
Like what's the next thing that everyone's going to need to jump on the bandwagon and talk about, right?
I think.
I think that would be one of the biggest things I would hope to just continue to shed more light on and
Yeah,
bring more awareness to that these things are real and we're losing men daily and
yeah,
we're um having more and more men just continue to struggle, right? And so yeah, to answer the question, I think that would be one thing just like I hope it at the same time it's getting a lot of awareness, which is a good thing. um, just more genuine love and in the space.
love that. And to piggyback off of that, one of my heroes, Chester Bennington,
Mm-hmm.
one of his last concerts, he said that love can overcome everything, and that doesn't have to be all this division and hate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even more impactful now that he's gone. Not to say that he didn't make an impact when he was alive, because he absolutely did.
Yeah,
But
sure.
you know, conversations like that and being able to say, love can overcome everything that is wrong with life right now. Love and kindness goes so far.
Hmm.
And to play off of the movement you have, hey man, how are you? That is so powerful.
Mm.
And I just everything that you said with that on the back end of it is just so many possibilities. And again, like I said, thank you so much for being on this podcast with us, man. Before we close up, where can everybody find you on socials?
Yeah, so right now it's just where everybody is. It's on Instagram and a little bit of TikTok. I don't but mainly on Instagram, it's Jason Men's Mental Health. And in there, like I said, I'm just starting to get going and create some other stuff. So there'll be like that, what do they call that, link tree in there, whatever, and kind of put you out to different things. But yeah, Instagram's probably the easiest so far.
Perfect. I'll be sure to include that in the episode so people can find you as well. At the end of every podcast, I like to read a quote that I find throughout the week on whatever subject that we or happen to be talking about, or just mental health in general. Do you have any sayings that you go by yourself, just that gets you through the day, or is it just kind of, you know,
Yeah. Um, a quote that I read a book called The Power of Now, and it's one of my issues with anxiety and depression was living in the future and not living in the present, right? And in the book of the Power of Now, it talks about tomorrow hasn't even happened yet, so why are you worrying about it?
mm,
And it's one of those things where, for me, it truly hit home, like whoa, like one of those things that like kind of cut you deep. It was like tomorrow hasn't even happened yet, like wait, what? And so stop worrying about it. Things will stress you out more than they ever can. But if you think about it, just living in the present, right, and trying to find that peace in your day to day, yeah, I think that's one that I've taken pretty deep with me.
yeah, that's a it's a good one because like we said, we're saying earlier, it's people are wanting that everything to happen now kind of thing, and
Hmm.
not living in the now, which is ironic
Yeah.
to that. But yeah, I like that quote a lot. And this quote I had found off of this account that I follow. Her name is Mel Robbins, but it is the quote was written by Mr. Alex Wolf, and it reads, "A friend of mine once told me, sad has three letters, but so does joy. Fall has four letters, but so does rise. Curse has five letters, so does bless. Ignore has six letters, but so does listen. Enemies has seven letters, but so does friends. Immature has eight letters, but so does maturity. Ignorance has nine letters, but so does knowledge. And negativity has 10 letters, but so does positivity. You have two realities to choose from. It's up to you to decide which one you want to live." So
That's
good.
amazing. That's amazing. That's so incredible because it goes back to, you know, you have choices. You can
Yeah.
choose to look at the stars or look at the mud, right?
Right. Right.
I love
I
that. That's
love that too.
awesome.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But thank you again, Jason, for being on today's podcast. I greatly appreciate you.
Hey man, my pleasure. I appreciate you, Chris.
Thank you, man. And for all my listeners, again, thank you so much for the support. And for those of you who actively follow every podcast, I am now currently on iHeartRadio. So please give a like, share, and follow on there. Thank you again for your support. As always, be kind, be real, be gentle with yourselves. Until next time, guys, much love.